Yeah, I'm happy to stand by that. I'll die
There you
on the
go. Well,
hill.
we're live now. Hello, guys. Hope you're well. It's me, Nat Rich, slash apparently Morticia Adams today. And I am joined with Joel. We've just been having some technical issues. I don't know what's going on, lately, Joel. I swear to God. Yesterday, I went, I was really well prepared and I set up my pre show that I was going to have because I couldn't, I was basically online for 2 days doing mental health first aid training. So I thought I'll have myself a night off and I'll put out a pre-record. And it was scheduled for 72 hours on YouTube. And all it was a video about this amazing instrument called the theremin. And it went to go live at 7 o'clock, and it said that the YouTube wasn't processing the video properly, even though it had been live, even like kind of pre-done for like 72 hours. So I had to jump online and go live and just kind of commit. And then I've had other shows and videos not going up. So my friend says, "Oh my God, they must be shadow banning you." And I'm like, I haven't done anything wrong. I haven't talked about anything that's remotely shadow banning worth. And then we've got this technical glitch today.
I don't know. You keep on talking about your trust in God all the time,
I
like
know. Well,
So
he's
you,
obviously doing it for the right reasons, but I just don't know what those reasons are.
well, that's what I mean. Like the powers that be. Remember, in your landscape, God is the power that be. But on YouTube,
Exactly.
they're the power that be. And so choose one. God, YouTube.
Yeah.
God,
Well,
YouTube. God,
I'm
YouTube. Or you
choosing
get
God.
shadow banned. There you
Yeah, I'm
go.
choosing God. If God wants me to be online, I shall be online. Here we are,
Exactly. And God won't
online.
shadow ban you. God never shadow bans.
No, hell no, hell no. So today, me, Morticia Adams, is with Joel slash J Brave slash Brevetti, and we are talking about Who's Your Daddy. I was meant to have someone else on the show as well that's talking about fatherhood, but it looks like it's just going to be me and you for now, which is fine. We're all right
Yeah.
with that, aren't we?
I'm all good with that. All good with that.
Perfect. So this is a good subject because it's related to fatherhood, and fatherhood is a leadership role. It's not just, hey, I'm having sex, having a baby, off we go, this is life. It's actually a complete new identity. Fathership role looks at every part of your life and how to improve it, how you can maintain stability within your life, how you can be a better husband, how you can be a better parent, what you need to change about yourself in order to lead by example. And you are a fine example, as far as I'm aware. Anyway, you could be an absolute nightmare, but I think you are a okay on the fatherhood front. But yeah, I wanted to have a chat with some fathers. So you're one of them. And yeah, I wanted to basically dip into that world. I have no children, as you know. I am still
Hmm.
a child, very much myself, living at home at my parents' house. Fridge is full. Mum and dad are still around, and I love being an adult child. It's very comforting, but I do value the upbringing that I've had and things that I went through, and it was a solid grounding until the age of like 11. And I think that's the most important formative year. So tell me, from your
Hmm.
uh, from your angle, fatherhood for you. Tell me what it means. What does the word fatherhood? What's daddy mean to you?
Well, that was a very interesting preamble with like lots of different things in there to unpack. I think the first thing that struck me from what you were saying, and something that I don't know whether it resonates with everybody, but there are these kind of societal, quite binary roles of mother and father, as if each of those kind of stand as totems who kind of represent something totally different, and there's no crossover. But I think what I've learned, not recently, but more recently, it's kind of come to prominence and to more people as well, is this idea that femininity and masculinity are not identities but energies, and
Yes.
that any person can embody either or
Oh.
both.
Mm-hmm.
And because again, it makes me look back at my own childhood. Now, I am a child of a home of divorce, but again, I was very lucky. My parents didn't get divorced until I was 15. So, to all intents and purposes, I had my mum and dad for all of my childhood. Uh, but however, I think it's only when you get to that kind of age that you start to actually like recognize almost the quantum mechanics of what your parents do for you. Because up until that point, you just kind of take everything for granted. I
I
mean,
totally.
me now as a father to kind of just like jump from that place to here now. My daughter just gets to wander around the house, like, you know, in her pants while she's potty training, little jumper, doing what she wants. But it's obviously a responsibility of parents, father, mother, whoever, to make sure that the house is warm enough that you can wander around with like no clothes on, or that, like, you know, that the things that you need, whether or not it be food, potty, education, entertainment, that they're all kind of there at your fingertips. But as you're growing, and again, just thinking now back to my own childhood, as I kind of try and match up, like, you know, the many great things that were made available to me in my childhood, and making sure that they're for my daughter, is ultimately the great parenting is almost letting your child not even realize that you're there parenting. You're just kind of there stewarding and guiding them through life,
Yeah.
in such a way that, like, they're able to explore their own agency without worrying about, will the light still be on? Like, you know, will there still be a front door? Will I be hungry? Now, again, that is not to in any way denigrate people who are unable to make those things happen for their children, but it speaks to a privilege that, although I am from a first generation immigrant family, I think a lot of people from, especially an African Caribbean background like myself, will know that our parents, regardless of how hard that they had to work, and particularly our mothers, like, worked, that they did whatever it took to make sure that the lives that they knew, the basics that were met for them back in Jamaica, back in wherever it was in the Caribbean, would be the same for us here. Even though, like, you know, the value of currency, your purchasing power here was so much less. So our mums, our grandparents, our parents had to work like longer hours, sometimes 2 or 3 jobs, to make sure that those things were there for us. And so it kind of, like, yeah, that juxtaposition helps me now recognize that there is so much more to parenting than, in essence, what is the cool part of being like a fun aunt or a fun uncle.
Yeah.
Parenting isn't about the, like, you know, like, oh, I dress my kid in cool little clothes, he looks like a mini me, we laugh, I teach them how to do little high fives. It's all of the things that support everything up until that moment. That little high five, that little dressing as a mini you, ultimately should be the cherry on a cake. But underneath that cherry, there's the icing, there's the cake, there's the baking, there's the ingredients,
Yeah.
and all of the constituent pieces that go to making that happen. So I think that, as I know of your shows and our conversations, there is not necessarily a linear path. And so whether or not I've answered your question, I don't know. But I mean, I think it's been a great introduction or great segue into this kind of conversation, because I think, yeah, for me, even as I've thought about the title of tonight's show, as I've kind of been coming up to it, it has been making me think to myself about what fatherhood means and what it will mean in the long run. Like, you know, am I going to be able to do more for my daughter than my dad did for me? And in the society that we live in, a part of that now is economic, it's financial, because regardless of whether or not you have a temperament or a spirituality or other things that can kind of be major blessings and major kind of like guidances on your child's path, if you do not have the economic stability to be able to remain zen or spiritual yourself, or to even be present, to be able to turn up for your child, like, you're already, like, yeah, on a hiding to nothing. So a lot to think about.
No, I love that. And it's so right. Like, there's this, you know, there's this perception that a lot of people have at the moment where money is not important, and they believe that money is not important. It's everything else that's important, and money is just something to add on. But the society that we live in has been built in a certain way that if you don't have the money that you feel that you need, you completely change your understanding of your environment, and it becomes a single focus, which doesn't allow you to be the best version of yourself in other areas. And what we have now is, I personally, I know that money is not the most important thing on the planet, but in our world and in our environment that we live in today, it's one of the the most important things that there is. And we have to find individually our relationship to money and our relationship to ourselves in equal balance. because at the moment the fear that is driving everyone at the moment is, oh my God, we can't go out, we can't do this, we can't do that. It doesn't matter how much money you've got, we're limited in some way. And I get that and I understand that. But being limited with finance in the bank being able to buy food is a different space from being limited with no finance. And there's two very different mindsets. And money has been made to be boring in the sense of learning about cash, learning about your finances, doing your accounts, doing your bookkeeping, all of that stuff. It's never really been sexy. It's never been appealing. However, the end product of money has been highly sexualized in so many ways that men feel like they do need to provide. They feel like they need to have money in order to have a sense of self-worth, just as much as women feel the same. But for me now, it's when I look at it in fatherhood and I look at it in finance, like, I don't think it's got anything to do, money has anything to do with being a father. I think that's money's got something to do with parents as a whole on an equal footing. But being a father is a different quality, and it's not one I think every woman can handle. And I understand the thing that you said about where people are saying the energies are the same, and I can be masculine, and some a man could be feminine, and we can have those qualities. But I look at it from a natural perspective. There are qualities that a father will instill into a young girl as she's growing older in choosing a partner. If she was straight and she was going to go with a guy and she's looking for a particular type of guy, there's qualities that a father bring into the relationship that she has that she doesn't even know anything about. And we tend to look for men like our fathers if they're good examples, and if they're bad examples, we unfortunately end up finding partners like that, generally, not always, but generally. And I think it's very tricky at the moment by trying to say, if it's a single mum, trying to get the single mum to be the best dad and the best mum and the best provider. And I mean, that's a lot on one person. And I think the role of fatherhood could be stretched out into brotherhoods and male support, as opposed to saying, hey, your mum can actually be your dad. And I think that's going to be okay, because I think a lot of people don't really think about it like that. I did a show on brotherhood the other day. Did you watch it?
I missed that one, but to your point though of what you're saying there, you're right that I think, and again, this is an idea that I've never vocalized before, so bear with me if this one kind of falls off a cliff. But
a raw and fresh version.
I know, but I suppose where we live in everybody's now probably aware of this kind of what's become quite a hot phrase, like the patriarchy, the patriarchal society. In essence, a society which is led by male decision making. I feel that what's kind of happened as a result of that is, and again, the conversation around toxic masculinity and a kind of pop phrase at the moment, which feeds into this, is that we have allowed society and, in essence, the market to become our father, and we just follow the direction of the money at large. And people look to the richest men in the world as kind of like paternal figures, whether or not they be real or dramatized. Like, your Elon Musk, Robert, what's his name, Tony Stark, from Iron Man. Carl, good to see you, man. But there is very, very much a kind of an overarching narrative through all of the media we consume of what male behavior is meant to be. And I think what that has ended up doing is it's become untethered from men as individuals, and people look beyond their physical father and look to as you said, the brotherhood, the fatherhood of what the world is offering at large. But in that moment as well, that untethering, it kind of goes both ways, because it also it strips individual men, individual parents, fathers of also their agency, because now you're being compared to whatever man in the public eye, as you said, like this kind of idea of finance being tied into manliness, being tied to like then fatherhood, and all of these things kind of all been words which are maybe like lateral to each other, but have then all been kind of conflated into like one idea. It comes this expectation that to be a father means that You got to drive like, you know, like the big body car. You got to have this house. You got to be able to like punch the jaw of the guy who's coming to chat with your daughter, and all of these stories that like all kind of like adds together, and we all buy into it. I mean, even now as I watch some of the Disney films, or even other like, you know, children's stuff, that I watch everything before I let my daughter watch anything. And obviously I'm trying to watch it through eyes of, imagine I was seeing this for the first time, and it's actually like, it begs belief almost, like how like political and how like propagandized all of these cartoons and things are. I think characters like Gaston in Beauty and the Beast, or like John Brown from Pocahontas, and all these characters, and this idea of like, you know, like me, man, I kill, I knock things out, and like, you know, ultimately the woman swoons over me and I get her as a reward. Like, I mean, yeah, as I said, this is how the narrative starts for boys, and then, as I said, because of this societal like umbrella that covers all of it, your manhood is then tied up into that as well. And so I think that a lot of boys who ultimately, as well, back to your point, never have to become men. They get to be big boys.
Yeah.
And then they find it very difficult. Like, I find it very difficult sometimes to kind of step up to the mantle of responsibility that is required, like every day, like 24/7, because even if you're not with your daughter in that moment, your every waking decision like still affects, like, you know, her or your child's life in the long run. So parenting isn't something you do only in their presence. You're a parent from the moment that you've got them till the end. Like, so I think, like, yeah, there is so many things that feed into it. But your point there, that if there were more of an actual community-based like brotherhood or network, that we weren't looking to superstars or fictional characters. We were looking to at one of our neighbors or somebody else who's like a great example, like nearby to us. I think, like, you know, that disconnect from who we are and who we want to be would become less. And I think that in that disconnect is where the toxic masculinity breeds.
No, I totally agree with everything that you say. And it's so important to be able to define what fatherhood means to each individual. I think it's, rather than a projected version of what we think that father should be, or an individual being like, oh my God, I've got to do this, this, and this. It's finding out what fatherhood means to you and embodying as much of that as possible that you can, and forgetting the rest until you're energetically or, you know, emotionally available to add on more. But it's this massive expectation for men to stand up, be more, do this, do that. It's so hard for men to do that, and to talk about their feelings as well. And, you know, I know a lot more people are talking about their feelings, but it is, you know, this is why it was an important subject for me. I've got an amazing father, like absolutely incredible father, and he's my best mate, and everyone knows it as well. We're like best buddies, and my mom, you know, she got jealous even for a little while because we were so close. And it's a beautiful connection that we have. And a friend of mine said to me, it was actually like an ex-boyfriend-ish, whatever he was, who's a lovely guy. And he said to me, do you know what, Nat? He was like, I really love the relationship you've got with your dad. And I was like, oh, that's really nice. Thanks. He said, but I was just like, God, he said, if you're looking for a man like your dad, you're fucked. And I'm like, what do you mean? And he's just like, they don't exist, mate. They don't exist. And I'm just like, oh. And it stuck with me because my dad's funny. He's kind. He hugs any individual that walks into the house. Like, he opens up the house. Everything's welcome. He's the pillar, like, in the community. He talks to everyone. He makes jokes with everyone. He's also quite flirty, but in a healthy way, you know, like he's just there chatting and getting everyone going. And he's so inspiring, and he's got a really good, you know, energy behind him, and supportive and patient and trusting, and, you know, everything. And you know, and then I think to myself, maybe that guy's right. Maybe it's going to be harder for me to find, because he's a particular type of guy. But I'm very lucky in that. But before I carry on, I wanted to acknowledge that Carl is in the room.
Thank you. I feel acknowledged. It's fine. Yeah. I'm sorry. Funny enough, I was on the phone to my son actually. He wanted some tips on fitness, and he's like, I'm not eating the right things, and Dad, I don't know what I should buy. And don't worry, you can be late. It's absolutely fine.
Just to everyone that is just joining us, or that we'll see afterwards, Carl has been with us before, Joel's been with us before, and today we are talking about the importance of fatherhood and what that actually means, and kind of just defining it and just having an open discussion about it, because I just think it's an important subject and not many of them happen. A lot of them happen with men and men. I'm obviously a woman. I want to have this chat and show men that it's okay to have it with women. So we've just been ranting and rabbling on about what we think fatherhood is, Carl. So I'm going to chuck the question straight to you. What do you think fatherhood means to you?
Boy, straight in. Yeah. Okay, let me say first and foremost that I was a father at 18 and I had to figure it out because I never had my father there. So my understanding of fatherhood whilst my father was around was, as long as you provide the bread, that's money, you're good. Because I would just become used to him not having any interest in what I'm doing, not supporting anything that I was passionate about, and basically just dictating to me how my life should be constructed before I've even formulated any type of understanding of what life is. So all those things are things which I would definitely say, just by the process of elimination, is not how a father should be.
Yeah.
But I didn't know that at the time, only until, again, becoming a father myself. So definitely supporting emotional development. They're free thinking. Free thinking is a must, because like Joe was saying, there's a lot of imagery and concepts which are being drilled in a very, well, it's not even that subtle anymore, but it used to be very subtle, with Sesame Street, you know, when they were peeling a banana, one skin, two skin, three skin. Okay, that's you know what I mean? And there's those little things, you know.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny, but it's sick at the same time.
You know, it's just one of those things. But then obviously we've also grown up with this idea that it's going to be the man's responsibility to save a woman. It's going to be the man's responsibility to slay the dragon. I've never met this dragon. I haven't been living with the dragon. The princess has been living with the dragon. She probably knows more about the dragon and the dragon's weaknesses than I do. But yet I'm supposed to go on this treacherous journey, you know, slay the dragon to attain the wealth. Because naturally, yeah. And then
this is a really interesting look into it. I never thought about it like that. When you think about slaying the dragon, it's like, you're true. Like, it's the princess that lived with the dragon.
Yeah, it's mad, and it's all symbolic, because because generally it's not the prince that's saving the princess. It's normally just some regular guy, you know, that's just been going on this mission now or whatever, and then he acquires wealth as well as
status.
his lady status, precisely, you know, and all these things through this journey. And naturally, you know, we're going to just take that on, just like, oh, okay, that's what I'm supposed to be doing then, you know? So I haven't quite answered the question, but just if I was to just summarize it, I would just say, just kind of being true to you, as in the father being true to himself, and just being there first and foremost, just being present, even if you're not getting along with children's mum or whatever, like just being a present and positive role model, and trying to minimize any of the constructs that you've once adopted, and not to project them onto your child. So any vulnerabilities that you do have, because obviously you spoke earlier about sharing your feelings. Now, a lot of us can share our feelings, but as we know, verbal is just a minute percentage of communication. It's the non-verbal cues that really our children are going to resonate with, and just people in general. So I think it's important to make sure that your non-verbal, verbal, and contextual level of communication with your child is on par, and it's the most truest version of you. And then once you can be that personification of what real is, then I think they would have a more positive blueprint into finding themselves in the world.
I love how deep you both go when you answer questions. It just fascinates me. I love the depth that you both explore. And this is, for me, this is why I want to do the Talkwards. It's because it's not like we're not just answering in a basic way. We're exploring ideas. We're going deeper down the rabbit hole. And it's really important. And, you know, I keep thinking lately, slightly off topic, but I have something that I'm developing called the self method. And the self method is something I learned, but it's in a different order. I mean, I learned it backwards, but it's in a different order now. So it's S is for sound, E is for energy, L is for lifestyle, F is for freedom. So it's self method, sound, energy, lifestyle, and freedom. For me, understanding who I am now, prepare and understanding what sound is, what my relationship to vibration and sound, my relationship to energy, what I want my lifestyle to be like, and how I govern myself as a citizen, how I am a sovereign being. What can I free myself of before I make any further commitments in this world? And what I mean by commitments is children, relationships, a commitment of who I'm going to be in society, where am I going to go? And people will say there's a lot to think about, but I look and I think, if I'm going to do anything in this world now, and I've thought like this for some time, but I couldn't really articulate it until I had the right words and until I had the right processes. But what we have now is a really fucked up situation on the planet in every way, shape and form. The only way of getting out of this situation is communication, clear, effective communication in every single moment. Mm-hmm. If we're not clear communicators with ourselves, it's very unlikely that we're going to be able to get ourselves in and out of situations effectively. And when I say getting yourself into a situation, having a child is a situation. It's a responsibility. It's going to require you to be on point with your communication to the nth degree. So your message of safety and communication and love and everything is given to that child in the right way. But most people don't even know how to communicate with themselves right now. Mm-hmm. And this is what I think, and what troubles me is people are going on a self-development journey, which is a really unstabling time and can break down everything that you think you know about yourself, which is massive individually. The people that are doing that with children, I think are superheroes at the moment. I'm like, that is a challenge and a half to question yourself and to ask yourself who you are and how you can become better for your child when you've already got a child. When it's, the hard work is like, oh my God, now I've got to do it now. That's huge. It's a massive responsibility to step up while while the event is happening. And I feel blessed in a way that I don't have kids right now, because I feel like, I've got myself. This is why I'm doing this. The least I can do for society, even though there's not loads of people, the least I can do is show up every day and have conversations that might make people think. That's what I'm good at. I'm good at talking, good at hosting. Put YouTube in the mix. Here we are. It's fine. It's easy for me to do this. But having children in this time and learning about who you are and then actually governing yourself and your children at the same time, that's an incredible thing.
Well, thank you. I don't feel anyone pats me on the back enough. So yeah.
Well, I'm patting you both on the back. Yeah, I'm just like, fuck.
I mean, you're right, because I mean, even small things like, for example, tonight, like I knowing that I was doing the show as well, and knowing, like I explained before, that I have my intermittent fasting window, which begins at 7, and so it meant that I had to have dinner in enough time that it would digest, that I could do the show, but I could still have time with my daughter. But the long and short of where I'm going with this is, in the end, I decided to put in some oven food. Basically, I had some curly fries and like vegetable fingers and stuff, and obviously for my daughter as well. But like, that will now sit with me like a little guilt knocking on the inside of my head, going like, what are you giving her to eat? What's that? Like, you should have boiled down some butternut squash. You should have like made some like full whole food, plant-based, clean food. Like, the moment you start taking like a little shortcut, like all of a sudden you're full of shortcuts. And so I try to maintain, like, the discipline all the way through, because again, to your point, Nat, that my mum was like a Goliath, really, like working all of those jobs, going through industrial tribunals of her workplace, dealing with like racism in the 80s and 90s, and still being in essence a single parent to three boys who were going to different schools at different times, making sure that we all still got into our schools with scholarship because we were like on our job, doing our homework and being on stuff, making sure that we still like kept up with our outside of school like activities. Like I was in the boys brigade, I was a pathfinder, like I went to archery class. Basically I did everything. Like, and my mum, she, in essence, when I now look back, as I said, as a kid, you don't notice that your mum's tired or that like she's at her wit's end and about to break. You're just like, Mum, I want this again. I just want another thing. I want this. So like, or like, why? Oh, why didn't Mum get us this? Or why did she buy me this coat when all of the other kids in school have got these fancy coats? And I didn't realize that when my mum was buying me the same duffel coat that Prince William had, but I wanted one of those little like NAFCO 54 jackets that all of the other kids had, like for £9 from the market. My mum's got me this beautiful like duffel coat, which is actually going to last me and actually keep me warm, rather than something which is just like throwaway fashion. And so my mum was already building into me the ideas of long-term thinking, of sustainability, of doing things like, for the long, not for the short. When they go low, you go high. Things that have now become buzzwords and phrases that go viral on social media were literally the tenets that my mum was able to maintain every single day. And so, yeah, I think that we as a generation now, and again, I will only talk about myself, but I mean, I would contend that everyone in generations from Generation X onwards, we've had an easy life comparative. Like we really have, because the life that my mum afforded me in comparison to my mum coming to this country from Jamaica, like on a boat, like, before passports, before all of these things, and then having to fit into a school where there was no subtlety to the racism. It was literally you're over on this side of the thing, and like such a volatile, difficult life. But at the same time, being able to provide enough of an oasis for me and my brothers, or and for other parents who I knew through the church, of other children who, when I talk to them now, like we didn't realize like how bad it was for our parents, because they firmed it for us. These days now, I know parents who literally like 1 hour of a kid like screaming in the house, they're like, "Oh, I can't take it anymore," and slamming stuff down. I was like,
and giving you a cartoon.
Do you know what I mean? I didn't see that in 18 years. I never had the digital babysitter, as it's now called, like iPads, TVs, and all of this kind of stuff, because the technology also wasn't available. So I mean, so many things have kind of have changed the playing field. But yeah, the point I was going to make though, Nat, is that ultimately, I mean, I want to be that parent for my daughter that your dad is for you. Like, I know that some people find it weird when I say it, but I'll be really happy if my daughter still lived with me, like when she was in her 20s, 30s. Like, you don't need to go no
26.
Yeah, I'm not saying about you. I'm saying 20. So if you wanna,
we talked about age.
You talked about age. What I'm saying is, I think this idea as well of you raise your children to such point as they fly the nest, or that they've got to go and join another family or do this. I think to me that is also part of like a misnomer that we've been taught. But why is that true? In the royal family, no one leaves. Everyone's still part of Buckingham Palace. They're all there. No one's going anywhere. And
that's
I'm like,
what we call my bedroom, the West Wing.
Why would I want my family to leave me? Like, I want my daughter to always be, and obviously, if anything, like bring more people to join our family. Like, don't need you to disappear.
Okay, so I think, on that, go on. I'm just going to cut in on that. So we're moving house. We're moving from the north to the south. We're moving to Devon, and we have collectively made a decision to move back to Devon, where I was originally from. And when I've been saying to people, "Oh yeah, I'm moving," and they're like, "Are you still with your parents?" And I'm like, "Yeah." They're like, "Oh, how is that?" They ask it because it's a COVID thing, and I'm like, "Yeah, the fridge is full, cleaning's done. I don't have to do anything." And I joke about it, but I really value it at the same time. But we're moving back to Devon, and for me, it feels so right to do this. And and I know friends of mine that are losing their parents, all the time. I've had loads of those conversations since COVID where people have lost someone in their family. And I'm like, I'm so grateful every day when I wake up, when I go for a walk with my dad and the next door neighbor's dog. And I'm just like, I'm so grateful I get to do this. And, I love my mom just as much as my dad. It's just that she doesn't walk with us and, she doesn't want to be on air or anything. I was going to get my dad on tonight's show and he's like, not tonight. But the whole idea is that I'm spending so much more time with them and I've become one of my mum's really good friends. Whereas before we didn't really talk, we didn't really connect. And it's so valuable at my age to live with them and to spend that time with them. It's beautiful. And I don't, like, most people think that's strange. And I'm like, I think everybody, if you can form a relationship as an adult with your parents, if you can, that's a magical time because you can define who you are and they know who they are and you can come together in a different way. And the relationship we've got now, I don't look at my mom as my mom. I look at, a dear member of my family that I want to love and, do stuff for. And it's a really different look on society. And I value it, with the elders as well. I'm doing an elder series, which I haven't fully announced yet, but I've got a couple of people to bring on to talk up from that elders perspective. We don't have enough elders in our society. We don't have enough elderly people that are imparting wisdom on us because we've been made to think, that they're all old and they're all going to die of COVID. And it's like, there's some magical wisdom there that hasn't come out yet. But on that, so I'm going to jump to Carl. Carl, how old are your kids?
My eldest is 16, my daughter is 9, and my youngest is 5.
Are they all same mum?
No, my eldest is from a different mum.
Eldest from different mum.
Yeah.
And what are the relationships? What are like as you've grown, and obviously the kids have grown as well. Mm-hmm. Do they all get on okay? Are they all kind of quite connected? Do you have a good relationship with them all?
Yes.
You do?
Yeah.
Have you made that something to strive for as you've got older, or is it just naturally always been that way? Because some people that have this like real strive now, they want to try and create the peace and the calm.
Absolutely. What I would say is I have evolved in terms of fatherhood from my firstborn to my second to my third. They are the thing with children is they are a relentless reflection of us, especially when they're that young and impressionable. And it's like, if they start getting under our skin or they're doing things that we're not happy with, or we find ourselves getting wound up or whatever by their actions or whatever, often their actions are somehow a projection of something that we've done or not done. Like we've missed something somewhere, And often if we can change our approach, it will change just the relationship in general. Now, with that being said, I didn't know that when my first son was born. So a lot of the times where I'm getting agitated or frustrated or whatever, I'm thinking, I'm not the problem. You're the problem. You're not listening. You're just taking a mick. You're just feisty like your mum, innit? Like these are the kind of things that's like coming into my head. And ultimately, that's not the case. But that was my reality at the time. I was saying things in my head, and a couple of times I'd even say it out loud, be like, wow, I didn't get those Air Maxes because I had to get your nappies, and you're actually not going to eat your food. Are you taking a milk? Like, you know what I mean? And these type of things, they're not realizing that ultimately it's just maybe it's how I'm presenting the food. Maybe it's not food that he even likes, you know what I mean? Just like all these little things. So in terms of my connections with them, because me as a person has evolved and I've understood that a lot of what I do is going to reflect on the relationship that I have with them. And if they're doing things which are not conducive to the growth of our relationship, then clearly I'm doing something wrong. It's not them, it's me. In order to get to that place, you kind of need to be of a reflective person and then take responsibility for your own emotions, like the emotional discourse that's going on in your head. So for like what you were saying, you find it difficult or not difficult, you find it a bit challenging to comprehend how difficult it might be for people trying to find themselves whilst having children. The benefit to having children is they are, again, a mirror of you.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah.
You know, they are a mirror of you. So if you start to change in yourself, you don't need to necessarily keep a log and a diary of your progression. Your children are going to let you know your progression.
Yeah,
They'll let you know when you're slipping. They'll let you know. You know what I mean? And not from a malicious place, just from that place of innocence. They just tell it how it is. You know. So 100%, and they've got that pure outlook. It's just organic. So whilst we've been conditioned and we've got these constructs and different concepts in our head of how things are supposed to be, they don't know that. They're just living and enjoying life for as life is and how ultimately we should really be. But because we think and feel and we try to create, you shouldn't drop that, you shouldn't spill that, you need to eat all of that, you know what I mean, or whatever it is, you know, it's just like we're creating fear. And don't get me wrong, it's like there are discipline elements in it, which kind of brings me on to another point that I just want to quickly mention is in terms of fatherhood. I think it's just like if someone asks you about spirituality, it just depends what book you read, which will kind of determine your definition or your own experience. And in terms of book and experience, they run parallel in a lot of cultures, because a lot of cultures deal with this thing that obviously we all know as common customs. And common customs is just to prevent the next generation from their own ignorance. So I will put something in place that you might not fully understand. Like there was something that someone said once, then they said, they might teach you, your parents might teach you to always cook in a glass pot, never a metal pot. In their head, they've already done a research to know that a glass pot will preserve any alkalinity in the veg, whilst the metal pot will ultimately destroy it. And exactly, and turn it acidic. Yeah. So it's not going to preserve it. But you don't have to necessarily tell all that whole backlog and all that research and all these statistics to your child. You could just say, we cook with the glass pot.
Yeah.
You know, this is the right way to do it. And then they'll grow up just doing it, never knowing how much that is actually benefiting them or how much of a detriment it is to them. You know, it can go both ways, but both of them are just common customs that you just pass on. And it might be passed on to you. Same way, just like a lot of emotional baggage that we carry as parents. I'm treating my child in a particular way because that's how I know to treat my child, because that's how I was treated. But then my mum, and I would say once I start getting a bit older and a bit wiser, I'd be like, Mum, you never really gave me a hug, you know. I wonder if that's why I'm like cold like that. You know, you never really gave me a hug. And obviously Daddy wasn't there, but he just never like pat me on my back and like nothing. Yeah. She's like, yeah, well, you know, my mum really never did that for me. You know, and then I find out that my nan's also got a story. You know what I mean? And then it's like at some point that cycle needs to stop. So a lot of the reflection is, I think, part and parcel of a lot of our conditioning and a lot of our emotional dispositions are often brought from our childhood, you know. And you're right, as adults, we should be trying to rekindle or reestablish some kind of solidarity with our parents, because they did often, not all the time, often they did the best with what they know. You know, just like with my first son, like if I could go back in time, I would do things differently. But I only learned that once I got to my second and third.
What does he think of you now? Like what kind of relationship do you have with him now?
In terms of, to be honest, he kind of sees me as an ATM and his personal training coach. You know, that's pretty much the relationship. It's,
and how old is he?
16. Yeah.
I was like, Mum was the ATM and Dad was the taxi. That was what I was. Yeah. So I would like go to one before at the beginning of the night, and then the other one would pick up at the end of the night, and that would pretty much be the relationship that I had with my parents at that age. But yeah, it's. I mean, it is interesting now, like because you know, and Joel, you've got a little one, so yours is 2. Yeah. So like you're in a sense of, obviously you're in a similar position with Carl in terms of that you are a father, but you're bringing kids up in very different, obviously you've got all other kids as well, Carl, but like you're now bringing up a child in a time where and I said this the other day on the show, we know a lot of stuff now. We know what's wrong. We know what's right. We know that you don't have to go far to find out what really works and what really doesn't. So you're essentially bringing up a child in a time where you've got a lot of research behind you, you've got a lot of knowledge behind you. So it doesn't mean that you're going to be perfect, but it means that you're going to have a better understanding and a relationship with your child because you know those things to be true now, because all the mistakes have kind of been done. But you'll obviously still have your own understandings and your own mistakes that will be ingrained because of your own upbringing as well. So you'll be learning on your way. But what do you think in reflection to what Carl said there, like from another father, listening to what he's saying and obviously listening to what's coming for you?
I mean, there were so many things from what Carl said that made me want to kind of just like fork off and start a new kind of conversation with Carl, asking him, because one of the things that struck me in that as well is, again, I don't know your heritage, Carl. Is your family from Jamaica as well?
Guyana.
Yeah. Okay, so yeah, on my dad's side, my dad's family are from Curacao, so which is kind of closer to Guyana than to my mum in Jamaica. But the point I was going to make though is that for a lot of people who are of African Caribbean descent, like myself, at least on my grandmother's side, my grandmother's grandmother was still a slave at the big house, like, in Jamaica on the plantation, and so you kind of have to remember. When we're talking about that generational trauma and things that are passed down, we're talking only 5 generations ago, my family weren't recognized as humans. 5 generations ago, they were still part of like an inhuman, like economic process that in essence stripped away their agency and humanity, and everything that each member and generation of my family has done since then, through pain, through tears, through difficulty, through still fighting like uphill battle. Not like as if like, when after that, and when like, my great grandmother's daughter no longer had to work at the big house. It didn't mean that Jamaica at that time was all of a sudden now the land of milk and honey. She was still having to do servant jobs, was still having to do, and then even at my grandmother's level, my grandmother was still also having to do menial jobs for the rich people now of the island and stuff, who ultimately were those who were the people who treated our generations, a couple of generations previous, as animals. So the point I'm making is, like, when you talk about if, for example, even that glass pot analogy, and the one I know is the one where people cut off the piece of the chicken, and they don't realize that when you trace the story back, it was the fact that great grandparents didn't have an oven big enough to fit the whole bird in. And so that's the reason why you cut the chicken down now. But people think, oh, we do it because we've always just done this. You trace it back and you understand the reason why we season the food so heavily was because we were given the poor cuts of meat. And if you didn't season it, you'd be poisoned. You'd be dysentery. And that's the reason why we eat the food so spicy. And there's all these things that there's actually very pragmatic and practical reasons as to why culturally we do these things. And you're right that there are kind of, as you said, was it custom? What was the saying you said? Something customs? Was it
common customs?
Yeah, the common customs that you bring forward. Some of them are cultural, but some of them are like life or death. Some of them you need to bring forward because if you don't, like, you don't know how to, like, keep your ear up at night because you don't know whether or not
Oh. There you go.
Oh no, he was on a roll.
He was on a roll. He'll be back, I guess, in a second. Joel, where are you? Earth to Joel. No, he's not there. I'm jumping back to you, Carl. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you.
Am I still here?
There you go.
All right. Yeah.
You were on a roll.
I was about to say, it just reminded me about dogs because, for example, dogs predominantly, and the dogs which have now become police dogs, the German Shepherd, Alsatians, those kinds of dogs, were often used for rounding up like slaves or bringing them back to the plantation when they'd escaped. And so now, like, just only 5 generations later, you have people laughing at black people's fear of dogs. And I'm like, that is an epigenetic feeling. Yeah. Like, Do you think that in 4 generations, when dogs were literally used to bring you back to your death, back to your flogging, back to your, that in 4 generations, you're going to be over that? Like, you're not.
I never knew that. That's crazy. I have wondered quite often, like, why Black people didn't like, not that they not all don't like dogs, but like I've heard that before, and I'm like, I wonder why.
Well, again, I think for every single thing that you might have a little "I wonder why" moment, I could almost promise you that there is a super practical and ultimately heinously economic reason that underpinned why it became a behavior. And as I said, the moment that you set a group of people up to be seen as subhuman or different than the others, that treatment, even the things that I now see, and part of why I became vegan, like some of the things that are now used in, like, for example, the dairy industry, like the rape rack for cows. This was actually first created for African women who were in the Caribbean, like basically to make sure that they could produce more children. So because obviously once you bought a slave, if that slave has more children, you automatically own them because your property gave birth to more property. So all of these things that now have, like, all of a sudden it's been transferred from the human slave market and economic system to the animal agriculture. It's the same ones and it's the same processes, which is why all of it to me is like, I can't be on any of it, any of this kind of dehumanization or robbing other sentient beings of agency. Again, I know I'm off on a mad tangent here now, but yeah, back to that point. I think as Carl was saying though, it just reminded me that, like, our parents, like, went through a lot of trauma. When my mum or dad or are unable to, like, show me the I don't know, the Disney love that the Darling family have in, say, 101 Dalmatians. You're like, we never grew up in a £2 million house in Putney with 100 Dalmatians around us. It's not realistic. Like, and so I have made a conscious decision. And again, when I back to that point of the knocking on my head about giving my daughter this food for dinner, it's because I have made a conscious decision that the trauma ends with me, that my daughter is going to be the first generation of my family where I will absorb it myself, because I am a deeply flawed person. I have so many things that are flicking off incorrect in my head, but I just have the equilibrium and the control to not allow it to become part of the physical world. I keep it in my mental and spiritual world, or as I said, consciously say to myself, right, I see the problematic nature of that thought process or of that behavior. Park it or deal with it yourself later or figure a way for it, but you can't let that be displayed here, because again, what Carl said, which was just like so like on their head, is that your children are literally like little photocopies of you, and you think that something like tiny that you did for 15 seconds on one day in their whole life, they saw what you did in that 15 seconds. They are all about that behavior now. Like, basically, they saw you go into the garden and go and have a little quick. Now all of a sudden it's like, they're coming back to the house like that Damian Marley. You're like, what? Anything you do that you thought was like, nah, I did it for a split second. They saw it and they will exponentially grow it out. So you kind of always have to be on your your guard, but on your A game.
The other day about the frequencies, and she said we're living in a time now where there's so many people that are spiritually waking up, that are growing up, and that are realizing their full responsibility. And it's our role within our families to stop what's happened and what's gone before, to stop that, so we can clean up the generation that's coming. And I think to myself, as a woman, I don't know, I don't know if I'm going to have children. I'd love to at some point, but I don't know if it's going to happen. And if it doesn't, if I join a family and I can impart what I know now onto another family, that's also fine. But it's like, whatever goes on beyond me, for me, I really try and make it as much that I grow as much as possible, because I want to have an effect on people that lasts, and I want to have an effect on what's coming after me. And I want to be able to make sure that what came before me, not that my mom and dad were horrible, but there was things that they did that they didn't know that they were aware of, or they, that I've brought to them now on my little spiritual path, and come home and been like, hey, I'm dealing with this and this, where's that shit come from? And they're like, oh, what? We joke around it, but they were military. Like, my mom was in the army, my dad was in the Navy, so there was a certain amount of emotional distance. not intentional, but just out of that's the way that they were. My dad's very loving and touching, but like my mum has been quite reserved. And, you know, I didn't really have a very feminine
influence
at all. So I grew up extremely out of balance feminine and ended up being quite a young, let's say a bit of a flirt, probably a bit too sexual than I probably should have been, looking for attention in a really unhealthy way, which didn't serve me. But I understood it now, and I look back and I'm like, that's because I didn't have the balance when I was younger. That's not to blame my mum. That's actually just recognizing what it is. And if I can now move forward and make sure that whoever I am the mother of, or if I adopt or whatever it is, that those children have the balance. This comes back to the very beginning point that we were saying, Joel, at the very beginning. It's like people say that we have masculine and feminine energy, and we do, but it's still healthy. I think that even if I was to adopt, and I've thought about it, do I adopt as a single parent? And I've thought about that a few times, because I've been single for 12 years this next week, 12 years, which is crazy. And it's
since
like,
you're 18, man.
Literally, since I was 18, if we're going on the age that I told you earlier. We'll move past the age again. But I have been single for 12 years. I've had guys on and off, but like in terms of full on relationships, and not since 2009 and almost since 2008. So I look now and I think to myself, if I'm going to be a mum in any capacity and I don't necessarily have a partner, I'm looking for individuals around me that can embody the fatherhood. Not that they have to become the father, but if I'm hanging around with friends and men that are embodying what I would want my child to see, that's a choice I need to make. If I'm hanging around with friends that are not the men that I want my child to see, I'm also making that choice. And it's like, I choose wisely, not because I'm trying to get the best out of everything in a manipulative way, but I want all of my life to reflect all of my values. So I feel to myself as a responsibility, and I've thought many a time, do I get a dog or do I look at adoption? And it's this thing. I know it sounds very thing, but there's like a big part of my life where I'm like, I want to be a mom. I want to love more in that sense. I want to grow into that. But I've thought, because I don't have the man or the right man at the moment around, where does that leave me? And it doesn't leave me feeling like I'm never going to have children. It leaves me looking for qualities in other men and other friends, just so I can build a support network. Because I think moving forward, it's not just putting it all, even if I do meet a guy and he's the dad, that shouldn't be the only positive male influence that my child has. It should be that there's loads of positive male men around my child, and that's what my child sees growing up. That's what I want to create. That's what I want to live in. So I feel like, even though we talk about single parenting and all that kind of stuff, but I think now coming into community, we don't have to all live in the same house and live in the same community. But when we come together, I think the responsibility for each other's children, and I think the responsibility to share and grow and move past the trauma, is something that we have to collectively come together with. And we have to build that, because it's not happened before. It's usually, oh, that's your child and that's our child. Now I think community needs to come into a different way and to stretch out in that.
I was going to say, the ancient wisdom before, the Western model took over was, as we know, in matriarchal African nations and kind of ethnic groupings, it was a village raises a child. It was everybody has a responsibility, that human life is a collective growth, as opposed to this kind of, as I said, capitalism wants us all to be individuals, because the more individual you are, is the more things you need to purchase to promote that individualism.
Yeah.
Whereas when you strip capitalism away, as I said before in the conversation, that capitalism is a series of adjectives, that you put before human. Every single word that breaks down, the difference between me and you, me and Carl, they're all tools of capitalism. Basically, they're ways of separating ourselves out when ultimately we are the same. I'm sure amongst the termite kingdom or the ant kingdom or any other kingdom that has kind of similar numbers on Earth as we do, none of them see themselves as individual ant or individual termite, even if DreamWorks and Disney or Pixar will try and tell you that they are. But they don't, because they recognize that their power is in the collective, and our power is always in the collective, and that includes back to that point you made earlier about the elders as well, because my mum's work as a teacher, an educator, was very much around the idea of the generational cycle, and that the generational cycle should never be broken. That from the oldest member of our community to our youngest member of the community, there should be an inextricable link that never breaks, so that the conversation never dies. And some of the people who I have had the privilege of getting to speak to from some of the different kind of like ancient peoples around the world, some the Sami people, for example, from Sweden, where I was going to be moving, but then also I've met different like Native Americans, but I've then also met people from the Congo-Niger basin, people who are now known by their nations, but again, those nations were drawn up as Western lines in the partition of Africa. But ultimately, inside of those national names, there are still actual like old ethnic groups and peoples: the Igbo people, the Yoruba people, the Akan people, and it is within those groupings, rather than the group of Nigeria or Ghana, that you actually then find the real historical stories. And in those historical stories, you understand that this blip of time that the Western civilization has been imprinted, the last like millennia, if even that, like our human journey is like almost 80,000 years old. We did a lot to make us survive and get that 79,000 years all the way up until all of this stuff started happening recently. And how did we do that? We did that through having a respectful relationship with those around us, but also with our environments, with our communities, and with with understanding how we fit into all of it, rather than seeing ourselves as individuals on the outside of it who use these things rather than be part of them. So, I mean, to me, knowing all that as well, I think the bravest decision that I'm looking to stick to and stand by in the raising of my daughter, and hopefully more children and other children who are maybe gravitate. I mean, whether or not that be yours, Nat, and those who you have adopt or however. But I am looking to future-proof my children in as much as what in 20 years' time, like in 2040 to 2050, what is going to be the relevance of having gone to Warwick University to do American studies? What's going to have been the use of gone to this secondary school in that postcode?
Doesn't it sound crazy going to Warwick University to study American studies? You're just like, what the hell?
And again, I'm not taking a mick out of anybody who's gone to study American studies at Warwick, but the point being that I feel that all of these things now are arbitrary. Like, what I think that my daughter and children now need to learn is, how do we repair our relationship with our natural environment? How do we sequester carbon and put it back into the ground? How do we learn how to do things practically with our hands to give ourselves agency in a world of flux? These things you're not going to be taught in any school. You're not going to be taught in any en masse educational facility. These are going to be things that we're going to have to learn, the hard way. It's almost like that film Into the Wild. But obviously, I want to do it with a little bit more structure. If you've seen the film, he obviously he ends up dying by himself. It's a great film to watch, Carl. A really great film. But
have you seen it, Carl?
No, I haven't. No.
You'd really enjoy it.
But yeah. I mean, ultimately, it's about a guy who just decides, you know what, I'm done with society. I'm just going to go figure it out in the wild by myself. Now, as I said, back to that point of it takes a village. Like, nobody would ever have been able to do that. You'd have got killed by the first saber-toothed tiger, or you needed people around you. You needed. This is how we grew as humans. But what I do believe, though, is there is still an opportunity for us to actually find our way back, for want of a better term. And I think our finding our way back is by being honest with ourselves and saying to that everything that we think that we know about these societies, these metropolises, this way of life as it's kind of been billed to us and sold to us, it's all a fallacy. And by the fact that I said that at the beginning and I talked about those Disney films and all that, I felt that if I was to say all those things, believe all those things, but then not take real action to change it, what am I even saying it for?
Yeah.
So to me, I've decided that those things are more important to me, more important than watching and listening to everybody fretting about when will our kids get back here, to nursery or to the school because of COVID, or they're falling behind. I'm like, falling behind who or what? We made that whole thing up as well. The only thing you're falling behind, you're only falling behind other people who are also all falling behind. So what are we falling behind? It doesn't make any sense. So to me, I just think if my daughter, by the time that you're 5, 6, already she's growing up to be bilingual. She already speaks so much Dutch that I don't understand a lot of things that she's saying, because of my wife. So she's already got the propensity for languages. She's already good, with letters, with colors. She can point out different flowers when we go on a walk. She's already, to me, starting to find enjoyment in the natural world, in the human world, in communications and things. I'm like, you keep on working on these things, you're gonna have everything you need in this life. As I said, no one's gonna test you on the square and the hypotenuse or Pythagoras when you're no one's asking you that. Just do the things that actually serve you. Strip away status, money, ego. Do the things that serve you, and that ultimately is the route to a happy life. I think when I look at the things that have made my life unhappy, whether or not it be as a father, a single man, or anything, it's always been status anxiety. It's always been, and when I say status anxiety, not even just as in I want to be on a table in a club. I mean the status of should I have owned a house by now, or should I have done this by now, and all of these things that are, as you said, that who are we keeping up with? Who said that anyone has to do any of these things by any given time? But even though we say these things, we still go to bed at night fretting, believing it. We're still should have made more money, or should have done. And ultimately, that is what robs us of our actual lives. We're living in the anxiety of the future and the depression of the past, but it's not grabbing now. So for me, to end my big monologue there, it's just time to grab the now.
Gotta grab it. What's your comments on that, Carl?
100%. I definitely obviously, what's it? Compulsory schooling's a century ago, maybe a bit more. So it's clearly wasn't that. How did we evolve without that before? So it's that's just a crazy one. In terms of the media, I would definitely say, and this is to touch on what you just said, Joe, or Jay, sorry. We definitely need to reduce the amount of music consumption in the mainstream for our children. And I say that just purely off the basis that we know, us conspiracy theorists know anyway, that all these industries or whatever, they've been infiltrated by other organizations that have their own agenda to serve them and their purpose. And whether you believe in that or not, you just have to look at it with an objective mind, and you can see that all these so-called states of statuses or whatever, it's being projected onto us. It's the drink, the alcohol. It's cool to get drunk. They're not showing you the man vomiting, going home and vomiting, and
they're not showing you on the Tuesday feeling.
Yeah. This is it. It's literally just, often just daytime porn. They're not really showing you the nitty gritty. The real consequences that happen internally as a result from. They're just showing you the surface. So I think it's very, very important to make sure that your children do have a level of understanding which is beyond the superficial, and it's challenging. But I think what Jay was saying in terms of exposing your children to nature and letting them figure things out for themselves, they're not being told what to know, what's important, what's not important. You go find what's important to you, and the only way you're going to find that is once you do it. I think they say, 1 ounce of theory can't measure up to 1 gram of action, so it's important that you do. That you do more than you're told. Is that one of the reasons why, Jay, I would like to ask you why you wanted to go to a Scandinavian country? Because they don't really, in terms of the schooling, they don't really start putting them into sets and based on their grades, and they don't give them exams until they're much older, right?
Yeah, you're right, actually. So where I was also quite lucky is that my wife, she never went to, she was my wife from the Netherlands. So she never went to a traditional school. She went to a Steiner school, which I'm not sure if you know about. But in essence, it's very much about,
isn't it?
yeah, it's very much about open-ended learning. It's not about kind of classes and like, and cramming and regurgitating, which is our way of like, in essence, memory tests. Like, and again, as we evolve into this world more and more now, memory tests are so redundant. Any of the things that you need in your memory, you can just type it into your Google search bar and you have it in 2 seconds. It's literally not relevant to learn these things anymore. You don't need to have that knowledge at the fingertips of your mind, because you actually have it at your fingertips now. Yeah. So learning things that actually will give you practical advantage, things that a robot can't do, like connect with somebody else, like be able to suss out in real time, can I swim across this like lake, or could we like use any of these trees here to create like, you know, a temporary bridge, like things that you're going to need to do in reality. Those are the things that you realistically want to learn. So then when we found that again, really quickly, I was going to be moving to Sweden to go to one of the oldest hotels there, help veganize and turn the hotel project carbon neutral.
Veganize
it. But beautifully, on the site of that hotel, they actually also have a vegan Steiner school. And so we were going to be like, well, perfect. Like, you know, our daughter can go to the school like her mum, but also vegan as well. So you don't have to worry like for a second that you're going to come back in the evening and go, oh, she wasn't eating, so we thought we'd just give her some eggs. And I'm just like, you hear this from other vegan parents that, or even vegetarian parents where they put their kid in daycare and like, oh, we just gave her a little bit of chicken, like, you know, but it wasn't like chicken on the bone. It was like chicken pieces. And like, that's still meat. Like, I don't get it. And so knowing that, like, you know, that the principle of the school and everybody there, like, you know, ethically and philosophically are the same with regards to veganism, but then also Steiner with regards to open-ended learning, we were like, this looks amazing. And we looked at it and understood and saw that the product, and again, it feels bad to call it the product commodifying children, but the end result of that kind of education is ultimately people who are far more open-minded, far more liberal, and less kind of stuck up, or not even stuck up. It's more about that the stiff upper lip thing of like this kind of keep quiet and keep your head down. Everyone's prepared to just like have a dynamic conversation because they're not scared of like, you know, of being shut down, because ultimately how you find yourself is through testing yourself against other people, not just like quietly just like shuffling along and like doing it as one's told, which ultimately is then what builds up and becomes like, you know, a massive like, you know, midlife crisis or cancer or domestic violence or anger like somewhere up the road, because you just bottled it forever. And so I love this idea of just like be expressive at every single moment, like basically, but then with that expression, learn to channel your expression. And then ultimately the greatest artists of this world, the greatest storytellers, the greatest anyone, are people who have channeled their creative expression. And so ultimately what we don't want to be doing in this life is suppressing. We want to be expressing. And I feel that what we do in education here in the UK is very much about suppression. Whereas like the education that I'm looking for my children and for the children who would be in my network and everybody that I know would be about expression.
My future children.
Your future children.
My future children, wherever they're coming from. God, bring them
to Uncle Joel.
As long as you bring me enough second handle. I don't want to be like influx. I'll be like, oh shite, what did I just order? But no, no. I do feel a little bit guilty sometimes. My mum and dad have got this unbelievable love for my nephew, my sister's little one, and it's so cute to see them. And they're like, I've never seen my mum and dad like that around children. That must have been like that with us, but. It's like, you know, watching it and I think, oh God, I'd love to bring them more grandkids because I see how happy it makes them. But it'll happen. But again, this is the thing. It's, you know, children have the ability to make people so happy just by the innocence, by the way that they are. And I think if we look after the children, we're looking after ourselves essentially in so many ways as well.
I agree, but I think it starts the other way.
It starts the other way, yeah.
We need to look after ourselves then, because otherwise, if we try to look after our children with the wrong thinking, they're gonna grow up with the wrong thinking. So
on point. Thank you very much, Carl, for your wisdom. So we have been going on for an hour and 15. So I'm conscious of time in terms of I didn't want to make it too long because I know people like, and this is valuable content, what you guys have been talking about, and I really appreciate it. And I know if somebody sees it for too long on a video, they never click on the video. So I want to keep it short in the fact that they can actually squeeze in this wisdom. But we have, I don't even know what I've got tomorrow evening. I say this every other night. I should know. This is what I'm saying. I don't plan anything really apart from the date and the time. Tomorrow night, I don't know. So we're going to have to make something up. I think I'll figure something out. But we do have at the weekend on Saturday, we have the second part of Law of Attraction, which is going to be interesting. We're going deeper down to that rabbit hole. And then on Sunday, I have the second part of Sound and Medicine with the same guys again that I had on the Sunday, which is another really interesting show. If you didn't watch them before, go and snoop on the channel and go and find out. But I am very grateful for you guys coming to talk to me today. As always, I have amazing chats with you both. And I'm really thirsty for these conversations and these chats and this depth because it matters. And it really, for me, it makes me feel like we're doing something. Even if we're just talking, we're sharing ideas. And I value you both so much to share your ideas because I think it's important that people hear this.
Well, thank you for giving us or giving me at least the opportunity to have the conversation. I think, like you know, and like I've learned from you, that the best way to approach your shows, your conversations are just clear your mind and then just kind of speak as a stream of consciousness. And so ultimately the conversation that I've had tonight, I've had with myself too, because I didn't know I was going to say it until I said it. So I've learned. Yeah, exactly. I learned from my own musings. So I thank you. But I think really though, I mean, Carl, I don't actually really get to talk to many other especially like Caribbean dads or dads like who are of that kind of similar like geographical demographic. So it's kind of like like very interesting. So like thanks as well for sharing, Carl, and I look forward to our next joint conversation on whatever topic that one might be.
Absolutely. Likewise.
Thanks, Nat.
I just wanted to ask, does anyone know which of the energies are male or female in terms of the yin and the yang, the chaos and the order?
Interesting question. Why are you asking first?
that sounded leading. The way you asked it sounded so leading.
Yeah, go on. Why are you asking?
It's not a trap. No, it's literally just because of something that you was talking about earlier in terms of the energy. Mm-hmm. And naturally you're going to be talking about law of attraction. So it just because it was in my head earlier, and when you brought up law of attraction, it just came to my head again. So I thought, let me just ask it before, because I don't even remember myself. So it's not even like I'm trying to catch you out or anything. I actually don't remember myself. So, but I'll just be interested to know.
Well, if I remember rightly, the yin is the masculine and the yang is the feminine. I could be wrong. Let's have a Google snoop. Yin and yang. Masculine, hold on.
And who's chaos and who's order?
It sounds like you want to hear that women are chaos and men are order. So it sounds like that's what you're trying to hear.
Yeah.
Don't say it. Spoiler alert.
Chaos theory. Yeah, in the chaos there is order, ironically enough, if you go into the quantum physics world.
Absolutely.
But it says yin and yang separately, stating that yin is negative / dark and feminine. Oh, I got it the wrong way around. And yang is positive, bright and masculine. That is apparently how it works, but it's not necessarily. I don't necessarily think that it's yin is dark as such, because when you do yin yoga, you're very relaxed. There's only very few postures, and you're in them for a very long period of time. So there's a lot of stillness in there. But we are embodying both at the same time. It's predominantly what we stay in most of the time is the one that we feel most comfortable in. And that's where that we can get lazy in that. So it's always an aim to work towards the one that you're not, which is quite interesting. And I'm reading a book on that at the moment. But I do feel like at the moment, in terms of energy, have you heard of David Data?
The name rings a bell, but
hold on. Let's go back to David Data, but I want to see what this is. Masculine energy, logical thoughts, mind, decisive action, risk-taking, achieving, controlling, competitive, intellectual. Oh, fresh the screen again. There you go. I don't know. Giving. And the feminine energy is, move it to the side. Intuitive. Why I'm reading this out and you're not, I don't know.
Intuitive feeling, senses, creativity, nurturing, experiencing, being, collaborative, expressive, and receiving.
Oh, I like that. I like the feminine.
And so that's what I mean. So exactly. So ultimately, you want to be like a healthy mix of them both, really.
And that's the book that I'm reading at the moment. It's just talking about that. So the best book by David Dada. There's two really good books, which almost might be three once I've read the third one. But Intimate Communion is really interesting. It's about the polarities between the negative, between the energies, but also his book, The Way of the Superior Man. Every man and woman on the planet needs to read this book. It is designed for men, but if a woman read it, she fully can understand the male role in her life and how to kind of rest to it and kind of allow it to be what it's meant to be, rather than being like, oh, I told you so, which is really bad. That all women do. They try and think, and I'm so guilty of that, so I'm not going to say anything else. But it's
put it in the notes below, definitely.
It's such an interesting book to read. Is the Way of the Superior Man by David Dada, and I'm reading the female version which he wrote, which is called, if I remember, Dear Lover. And it's a very interesting book, and it talks I'll explain very briefly. It talks about a man always wants to see us softening, and not in I need to see my woman being weak and surrendering all the time. It's actually about the softening process. So even if we can have strength in our vulnerableness, and even if we're going to get rejected or people are going to say no, or we're going to come up against, problems, a woman needs to allow herself to keep opening up to love and opening up to love in that path that she walks. And even if the man doesn't meet her there, she's still brave enough to walk alone. And that in itself, it teaches you self-love at the same time as being able to soften to your next man, rather than being like, the last 20 guys really upset me, so I'm going to bring all that bullshit into this relationship and hope that it works out, which is what a lot of women do, which doesn't work out at all. But this book's really interesting. So I think if you're looking on that journey, Carl, those two books, that's my last bit of information for the day.
Thank you. Well,
imparting someone else's wisdom.
I'll be on the book depository this evening.
Right. Okay. I'm getting in the bath and listening to the Dear Lover one. Love it. So guys, I don't know when you're back on. Don't think I booked you, but it is my interview booking day tomorrow. So I will be in touch and I will put you on the dates that I think have got coming up. I've got a whole other 6 weeks worth of stuff. So I'll put you on there. Where I need music at the end, isn't it? And I've got a little video. So
This is the return of Space Cowboy.
On that note, guys, everyone else that's listening,
we're freestyling away now, aren't we?
You two stay where you are. Everyone else at home, we'll see you later. We'll see you tomorrow at 7 o'clock. Don't forget, 7 p.m. every night. I shall be here. And subscribe, please. Thank you. Bye.